Good morning, everyone. So we are kind of continuing on with working with plantar fasciitis. Shin splints, really any kind of ankle or foot injury that we're recovering from. What we're working on is a very generalized movement therapy for reconnecting the foot, mobilizing the foot, building stability in the foot related back up to the hips, specifically the glutes. I want to work on mobilizing, kind of getting the foot mobilized and awake in relationship to getting some good glute activation today. We will be using a yoga wedge for the foot mobility. If you do not have a yoga wedge, everything we're doing can be done without the wedge. The wedge just adds a little bit more, kind of puts the foot into a pre-stretched position so we get a little bit more mobility out of it. But you can do the same work without the wedge, and once you get the wedge, you'll actually find that the wedge, you'll get more benefit out of the wedge by having some time without it first. So, with all that, let's get started. So we're going to start with a standing assessment going into our balanced standing clock and really just looking at two particular positions of the clock, 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So with the balanced clock, we're going to start with a very spreading the toes wide, try to really spread the knuckles of the foot as wide as we can. And the most important part of the clock is maintaining a good stable base of the foot. So I want a good tripod platform. Ball of the big toe, ball of the pinky toe, and heel all need to remain on the ground throughout the movement. We're going to come into a single leg stance, and this is where we got to have that good tripod. If you find that your foot is rolling back and forth, that is not a stable base. You're going from bipod to bipod. If my knee turns out, the big toe is going to lift up. If my knee turns in, pinky toe is going to lift up. So I want to make sure that that base is solid. As we come into that single leg stance, we're going to explore out to the side. As I reach out, I'm also extending the toes as far as I can, and then I want to bring it all the way back up. Then we're going to the opposite direction. As I go to the opposite direction, I want to let the hips turn a little bit, and again, reaching and extending out with the toes. I'm only going as far as I can, maintaining that perfect foot connection to the floor. The rest of the body can be loose and wiggly if it is not as big of a deal, as long as we're able to maintain that connection through the floor. As we're getting into it, we're slowly seeing if we can go a little further out and all the way back without losing that foot. And we're looking to go a little bit further in both directions. We'll do about 5 to 10. And as we're doing it, we're going nice and slow and really getting a sense and feel for, one, how difficult is it to maintain that connection to the foot with the floor? How far are you able to reach? And as you reach, can you start to feel that work through the hips, especially this back one? As we're reaching straight out through the side, can you start to feel that glute activate with that reach? And then we're going to switch, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Get a nice, solid, grounded foot, finding that single leg stance, and slowly working back and forth. Now, I want to do some assessment side to side. My right foot feels less stable right off the bat. It's a little shakier. And as I reach into this 3 o'clock, I have a little bit of knee discomfort on that medial knee. So I'm not pushing it. I don't want to go into pain. And it's there as I reach out to the side as well. So I want to go slow. I'm working right up to the edge of discomfort without going into pain. And as I do a few of these back and forth, the knee's actually feeling a little bit better, and it's allowing me to go a little bit further. But this leg still feels less stable than the other leg. My right foot is the foot that I've been feeling some plantar fasciitis pain over the past 4 or 5 days. So this all tracks. That medial knee pain is affecting my footfall, how I'm walking, and my gait mechanics. My body's trying to avoid going into that medial knee, which puts a little bit more stress at the plantar aspects of the foot. All right, we're going to come back at the end of class and we're going to reassess that standing clock. And hopefully we're going to find that our foot feels more mobile, more connected. We feel better stability, and we're able to get into that movement a little bit deeper. We're now going to come down into our quadruped, spreading fingers, grounding palms, and extending elbows fully. And we're going to get in and start mobilizing the foot. So tucking the toes, turn the heels in towards each other so that we can get primarily the big toe tucked underneath. We're inhaling as we rock forward, exhaling as we let the hips sink back into the heels. Inhale comes back forward, and with each one, we're seeing if we can sink a little bit deeper. And I really want to feel this kind of mobilizing and stretching the big toe joint and into the arch of the foot. Start to notice if there's a difference between the right big toe and the left big toe. Is one side stiffer, achier? Are you not able to get as deep into one compared to the other? My left big toe is stiffer, tighter. I cannot get quite as deep into it. After about 5 to 10 reps, we're now going to turn the heels out as far, excuse me, as far as we can, so that we can now get tucked underneath all the way out to the pinky toes. With the pinky toes, everything else is exactly the same. Inhale going forward. Exhale as we rock hips to heels. And again, I want to kind of get deeper and deeper on each one. Can we start to feel that lateral, the toes all the way out to the pinky toes getting mobilized, and some stretch into the lateral arch of the foot? And then we're going to do some windshield wipers. So we're going to kind of find soft tension, sinking into it lightly and rolling heels out to in, going back and forth. Now as we're doing this, we're getting some good mobility into that midfoot area. Notice if it feels stiffer on the right side, right foot compared to the left foot. Does it roll as easily? Is there a tight spot in the arch of the foot? Do you feel it more at the ball of the big toe? Where do you feel it? All right, so we're going to come back to our starting point in our quadruped. I want to have the toes still tucked underneath, and we're going to get into some pelvic tilts. Nice inhale breath into our belly. As we breathe into that belly, it allows that belly to draw down to the floor. Pelvis is going to tilt down. We're going to get this nice big sway in our low back. And then as we exhale, drawing that navel up and in towards the spine, and feel that scoop of the pelvis. As we scoop, we should feel some light stretch into the low back. Inhale. As I'm coming forward, I'm really trying to inflate that abdominal wall. Can you feel some stretch through the abdominals just from that inhale breath? You get a little bit of mobility into that low back. I want to make sure we are avoiding any kind of pinch or pain in the low back in either direction. If you feel tightness, as long as it is not painful, I want to exhale and continue to try to scoop into it. See if you can get a little bit more mobility without it elevating into pain. And with each one, I'm trying to get a little bit more anterior tilt and a little bit more scoop. After about 5 to 10, I think I'd go higher reps on that one. 10 is probably a good number, especially if that low back feels a little bit tight. We can now start to let that movement wave up the rest of the spine. So as we scoop on our exhale, we're going to continue to scoop and allow that movement to work its way up. As it gets to the shoulders, we're pressing down into the floor and then allowing that movement over the top of the head, like we're trying to touch our forehead and our tailbone to this imaginary place right here in the middle. And then inhale, doing the same thing in the opposite. Allow that spine to open up down towards the floor. As it moves to the chest, the sternum's reaching down and the head comes up last. See if you can feel that wave-like action of the spine. And notice if there's particular segments where it feels a little stiffer, where it doesn't move as well, where it feels tighter. If you can kind of get in and like get a little extra reach through those areas. And if you reach in one direction, then I want to do the same thing in the other. So if you find one particular segment of your low back, mid back, upper back, kind of find that spot, breathe into it, and then go to the opposite direction. Find that same level and breathe into it. Next, we're going to go ahead and bring hands forward, nice spread hands. This is where we want that downward pressure, actively pushing into the floor. Elbows are actively straight. I don't want them to be bendy or passive. From here, we're going to do a few more pelvic tilts with our breath. Inhale, letting that pelvis tilt to the floor, big sway in the back. Exhale, draw that navel in as we scoop. Again, feeling into that low back space. If it's tight and restricted, I want to kind of move into that tension slowly, softly, safely, not forcefully, but I do want to move into it. I want to make sure we're not pushing into it to the point that it becomes painful. But we can kind of squeeze into it lightly with each breath, seeing if we can get a little bit more mobility out of that low back area. On the next inhale, as we exhale and actively scoop, we're also going to reach the sternum down towards the floor. So I'm scooping pelvis as reaching down. Inhale, coming all the way back up into that sway back, open belly. Exhale, navel comes in as we scoop, and then reaching the chest down towards the floor. I want to really kind of feel into the shoulders, especially this armpit area of the shoulders. How do the shoulders feel? Is one shoulder a little tighter and more restricted than the other? Does one hand feel less connected to the ground as you're reaching down than the other hand? That's actually a really important assessment point. Then on the next exhale, as we drop and reach, we're going to stay at the bottom. From here, we're going to push through the hands. Feel the shoulder blades slide up to the ears. And on our inhale, we're pulling through the hands. Feel that spine move forward. Shoulder blades are sliding down the rib cage. Exhale, push. Feel your shoulder blades come up to your ears like you're wearing them as earrings. Inhale, pull. It's not a very big range of motion. The only thing I want moving is the scapula along the rib cage. Feel it slide your body forward and then sliding your body back. And as you pull, see how far down can you feel those shoulder blades move towards your hip pockets, like they're packing straight down. As we exhale, how far up can they slide? Then we'll come out of that position. We can shake the shoulders out a little bit. We're now going to get into our V-sit. Nice wide V-sit. Want to actively reach the back of the knees down to the floor and then actively pull the top of the feet back towards the shins. Our hands come down behind the hips, grounding to the floor, spiral the elbows out and away, and feel that spine get nice and tall. We're going to start by looking at our rotation of our long bone of the femur, paying attention to the kneecaps. So we're going to spiral kneecaps out as if we're trying to touch the floor on the outside of our leg, and then we're going to spiral them in as if we're trying to touch the floor with the kneecaps on the insides of our legs. And inhale as we come to the center. We're exhaling as we open, trying to touch the kneecaps to the floor. Inhale back to center, and then exhale as we turn inward towards the floor. Now I want to focus on the kneecaps and not on the feet. My feet, when I turn in, I can turn my feet a lot more than I can turn my knee. And so I might feel like I'm getting good range of motion if I'm focusing on the foot, but if I look up, I might find that I'm not actually getting a whole lot of movement up the leg. So it's really up the thigh. This is where I want to feel that spiraling action. How far out can I get each knee to go? How far in? And this is an important assessment point is, does one kneecap go further out than the other? Does one kneecap go further in? You might find that one leg goes out and in further or less far than the other, or there's an oppositional pattern in which one leg goes out farther, the other leg goes in farther, and they're both restricted in the opposite direction. These are important assessments as far as like getting a good understanding of what's going on in our gait mechanics that can be relating down to pain in our foot. Next, we're going to lift the hands off the floor. We're still actively pushing the back of the knees down, actively pulling the tops of the foot towards the shin, and we're going to get into a little bit of folds. Reaching forward on our exhale. Inhale brings it all the way back up. Now, as I fold, I don't want to drop my head or reach my chest straight down to the floor. I want to keep the spine nice and long. The hands are sliding forward. And I'm only going as far forward as I comfortably can. Slight discomfort, not pain. On a scale of 0 to 10, I do not want to touch that 3. That 3 is going to give us the pirate look. It's going to start to create tension. I want to stay under that 3. Non-forceful, non-painful. But with each one, as long as we're not elevating into that 3, we can see if we can reach a little bit further into it. Inhale, coming all the way back. Notice if it feels tighter on one side more so than the other, in the hips or in the low back. Once we get about 5 reps, moving straight up through the center, we can start to move a little bit offline, off that midline. However, when we do, I want to keep my hands and my shoulders square together. So I don't want my hands moving separate from my shoulders. Whichever direction my hands go, I want to make sure my shoulders are turning square with it and reaching both hands square. Going side to side with that. As we move side to side, that's going to start to stretch, get a little bit more mobility to one side over the other, which if we have some tension differences that are greater on one side, we should start to notice that. Now, I have better mobility when I move to my right side. I can reach further. I can also rotate further and get further along, which is interesting because the right side is where I have discomfort. My left side, however, it's harder to rotate. It feels more restricted. And then when I get into the fold, I can feel that in the low back as well as the back of the thigh on this side. So I have more tension and tightness related to the back line of my left leg than I do on my right leg. So my left leg has some impact on what's going on in my right foot. And this is important. This is a reason why we're doing more of a full body assessment, is because what's going on, pain in my foot, probably has a lot to do with what's going on in the left side hip. And if I only focus on my right foot, my left hip won't get better, which means the pain won't get better. And people spend a lot of money and time getting treatment on the source of the pain, especially for things like plantar fasciitis and shin splints, and they don't address the deeper problem, which is probably related up into the hips and might have impact in relationships to the opposite side. And if they're not working that, they're not going to get relief in that foot. All right, now we're going to get into our shin box position. So I am in my left side shin box, left hand is coming down to the floor and grounding, spiraling that elbow pit out and away, lifting the spine nice and tall. I want to feel that nice open chest to the ceiling. And we're going to start with some just simple hip openers. Lifting that back knee up towards the ceiling as we exhale, inhale as we bring it back down to the floor. I want to make sure we're not going into pain in this hip, so go slow. And I want to see how high can we lift that knee? What does it feel like in that hip? I want to make sure we are not shifting. As we open this up, I'm not shifting my upper body back and I'm not rotating my chest. I'm staying pretty locked in onto my left side so that my right knee can just lift and open up. And I definitely have some tightness and tension. It's morning. This is my first movement of the day. This is usually get a little bit more range, but this is pretty good for first part of the movement. After doing about 5 to 10, we're going to slowly switch windshield wiper all the way across to the other side. Again, grounding palm, spiraled elbow, tall spine. Doing the same thing on that opposite knee. Slowly opening that knee up to the ceiling. Inhale as we bring it down. Now right off the bat, my left hip is tighter. It's not huge difference, but I'd say I got about a 20% less range on the left hip than I do on the right hip, which is fairly normal for the injury history that I have. And this is going to be the part of my left hip that is contributing to what is going on in my right foot. Going nice and slow, not forceful. Since both sides do feel tight, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do another round of that movement. So I'm windshield wiper back to the first side, grounded palm, tall spine, spiraled out elbow, inhale to exhale, lifting that knee. And just coming back to this a second time, I now have my normal full range. So just going through it one time really helps to open up that mobility. Non-painful, feels real smooth. So I'm just going to do 5 reps. And then a nice windshield wiper back across. I want to see if I got similar improvement on this side. And I'd say yes, very much so. Still limited. It's not quite as much range as the right side, but I'd say it's now maybe 10% less range than it was, and a significant improvement from that first time. So good rule of thumb is if when things feel really tight, do a few reps, both sides, and then go back to it. Going back to it, you will probably find that just that first round coated the joints with synovial fluid, kind of awakened the nervous system, made it safe to get into the movement, and your body will feel, get back into that movement a little bit better going back in it the second time. All right, gonna switch back to our starting side. So back to left side, grounded palm. Now we're focusing on hip mobility on that back hip. I want to inhale as we reach that hip down to the floor. Exhale as we lift it off the floor, reaching it forward and scooping into it so that we can feel some light stretch through the front of the thigh. Inhale, reaching back. Exhale, scooping forward. This is a very small range of motion, and we're just focusing on this back hip. So I want to avoid, as I reach with that hip, turning my chest, moving my shoulders, or even jutting out my rib cage. It's just scooping into it. This might be the better position. So inhale, that hip reaches back. Exhale, it comes off the floor, reaches forward, and then I'm scooping that tailbone into it. How much stretch can you feel through the front? Can you start to feel some tension in the glute? The more we scoop into this, the more that glute is going to contract. And I want to, if you can feel that contraction, then I want to continue to scoop into it even more. Inhale back, exhale, scoop. And then we'll windshield wiper across to the other side. Grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder. Inhale into that back hip, reaching it to the floor. Exhale, lift, reach forward, and scoop into it. Again, left hip is tighter in this range. Generally, my left hip is tighter through this front compartment of the hip. So this is a more restricted range of motion. And again, this is a part of the problem that I have with my right foot is in the mobility of the left hip. Now, as I'm getting some reps in, I'm starting to get a little bit more range. It's starting to get a little bit more similar to what it was on the right side. But again, since both sides were, one side was stiffer than the other and both sides were a little stiff, I'm going to go back. We're going to do another round of those for both sides. We'll just, again, just 5 reps. Inhale, letting it reach to the floor. Exhale, lift and scoop. This time I will really want to maximize how much scoop can I get in order to get as much of that glute contraction as possible. And second time coming back to this, this right hip moves much, even better than it did on the first one. And then again, we're coming all the way back across to the other side. Oh yeah, so left side still a little bit tighter than the right, but definitely an improvement just from a moment ago, just coming back to it a second time. Getting into that scoop, I'm getting a significant amount more glute contraction, although I'd still say this left side is still a little bit limited in comparison to the right side. Now as we come back across, we're now going to get into our folds. With the folds, I want to work back and forth, so I'm not going to just focus on one side at a time. Folds, I'm also not going to get overly focused on where we get our reach. In our folds, we can reach straight through the shin, we can reach through the angle of the knee, or we can reach beyond the knee, moving towards the thigh. However, wherever we reach on one side, I want to explore the same pattern on the other side, but we get to be a little bit more exploratory. We're going to go back and forth, and we're going to do a good 20 reps, which means you can really explore a lot of those different angles. So, nice inhale as we exhale. Again, tall spine. I don't want to drop the head or reach the chest straight down. Keep that spine long as we reach. Inhale, bringing it all the way back. And then we'll take another breath cycle as we windshield wiper across. And doing the same thing on the other side. I want to go have a nice slow inhale, slow exhale, so that as we move back and forth, we are going slow with our breath. This is not fast. The slower we go, the better. And with each one, we're seeing if we can reach a little further. Can we drop, keeping that tall spine? Can we drop a little lower? And where do you feel this? Where do you feel it on the left side compared to the right side? Is one side tighter and more restricted than the other? When I come to my right side shin box, left hip is tight through that same area. I also have a little bit of tightness in the right glute. As I come to the left side, it feels a lot easier, a lot freer. So I get some stretch, but my range of motion is bigger and less restricted than when I come to the right side shin box. Again, left hip and right glute. So this is an area where I can feel how that tension in our left hip and front of that left hip is paired to tension in the outside of my right hip. And that right glute, that's what's going to be related down to that foot where I'm having some plantar fasciitis pain. So this is, my hips have a lot to do with what's going on at the foot. As we're going back and forth, we can start to now open up that shin box, letting that back leg slide open up a little bit. That's going to change that mobility pattern into that back hip. It also will help you get into that glute a little bit differently as well. And as we do whatever you do on one side, we're doing the same thing on the other side. Again, this side is, especially as I open that hip, I really feel that left hip and I feel that tightness in the right glute at the same time. So that's an important pattern for me as far as what is going on in my foot at the moment. And the more that I've been working on this, the better my foot has been feeling. I started having some foot pain, I think about 5 or 6 days ago. And it never really got that bad because I started working on it immediately. And it has definitely improved, although it is still a little irritated. Once you have inflammation, you have to go through the inflammation process, and that just simply takes time. We're slowly continuing to open up that back leg, getting closer and closer to what we would consider a yoga class pigeon pose. However, I am not overly concerned about getting into a perfect pose. I want to be more in an exploratory state. Good. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and stand up, and we're going to get our wedge out. We're going to at least have it out to the side for right now. So this next part of the class is going to be a little bit more challenging as far as teaching it, especially in a video. So I'm going to do my best. This may be something that coming into a live class or doing a consultation will be a little bit better at instructing. But I want to think about our foot in terms of almost like robotics. We have 5 long bones that go to each toe, and each of those long bones should be able to move and ground to the floor individually from each other. And I want to see if we can start to kind of calibrate that ability to move them and especially ground them to the earth, to the ground. So we're going to get into a wide stance, and we're going to bring one foot forward just a little bit. And I want to spread the toes as wide as possible, and I really want to feel grounding through the ball of the big toe out to the ball of the pinky toe. And ball of the pinky toe is a little bit, the base of that pinky toe is far behind the toe itself. So I don't want to lift up. Right here, the ball of my pinky toe is off the ground. So if I keep that big toe, that pinky toe down, as I ground, this, I can get my heel up, my ball of the pinky toe is still off the ground. If I go a little higher, it's lifting up off, no longer in contact. So heel just lightly being lifted up, we can maintain that contact. So with that foot forward, toes spread, we're going to focus on the knee. I want to turn the knee internal, feel that pressure push into the ball of the big toe, and then we're going to spiral that knee external to feel that pressure through the ball of the pinky toe. But as we spiral, as I spiral in, I don't want that pinky toe to lift off the floor. So I have to maintain pressure through the outside as I'm dropping that knee to the inside. And then same thing as I roll out. I want to make sure that ball of the big toe is staying grounded down. I want to feel it, that pressure as that knee is pushing more into the ball of the pinky toe. And as we're doing this, you can kind of look at your heel. If your ball of your foot is staying grounded, as your knee turns in, your heel is going to turn out. As your knee turns out, that heel is turning in. So our forefoot, the ball of the foot, is staying flat, and that heel is turning in and out, which means that through the midfoot, we're kind of wringing those joints out like a washcloth. And that's the effect that I want to feel. You might feel some stretch in the arch of the foot. If you do, good. That's what we're trying to seek. We're trying to mobilize that foot. Next, we can kind of get a little bit into planting through the ball of the foot. We'll keep the knee just over the foot, lifting the heel up and driving the heel up to the ceiling, and then bringing that heel back down, softening it to the floor. So all I'm doing is kind of lifting up, planting so that we get some stretch maybe through the ball of the foot, ball of the big toe, even out to the pinky toe, and then bringing that heel back down. And as we do this, we can turn that knee a little in, or we can turn that knee a little out. So I can focus, if I turn that knee in, I'm pushing more into the ball of the big toe. If I turn that knee out, I'm pushing more into the ball of the pinky toe. So as we're going back and forth, notice, is it hard to maintain pressure through that big toe? Is it hard to maintain pressure through that pinky toe side? It may feel really strong, but it's important to feel it because I want to notice if there's a difference when we move to the other side, which we're going to do now. So switching our stance, still wide, and then that leg is a little bit more forward than the back leg. Grounding, spreading the toes, grounding that ball of the foot, and we're turning that knee out and then in. Again, maintaining a good, solid connection through the ball of the big toe all the way to the pinky toe. Now, as I get to the left side, again, my right foot is the side that I've been dealing with some plantar fasciitis pain. But my right foot was really mobile. I could get good mobility on it. My left foot feels very stiff. I'm able to get that knee turned out with a high arch, but man, I feel some tightness. And internally rotating, it is a lot harder to maintain pressure through the pinky toe. And I get a good stretch there in that external spiral. Internal spiral is just hard to get into. So how much of the pain in my right foot really has to do with immobility in my left foot and my left hip? Good question. Next, still keeping it on that same leg, we're now going to lift the heel, planting into the ball of the foot, driving that heel up to the ceiling, and then bringing the heel back down to the floor. And as we're doing that, we can turn that knee out so that we're driving through the pinky toe, ball of the pinky toe, and we can turn that knee in so that we're driving more through the ball of the big toe. An interesting thing on this for me is my right foot felt solid through the ball of the big toe and the ball of the pinky toe. My left foot, I feel pretty solid through the ball of the big toe. But when I turn out to the ball of the pinky toe side, it is not as connected. It's harder, and I feel a greater tension, especially to the outside of the calf. It's not painful, but it's different. It's significantly less. I have less force, less control, less ability to feel, just solid through that ball of the pinky toe side. All right, so now we're going to get the wedge, and we're going to do all the same things, adding the wedge in. So the way I want to place the wedge, my foot is perfectly straight. The wedge is going to come in at a 45-degree angle, so that as it slides in, it's going to be a 45-degree angle to the big toe. As it slides in, it's going to go underneath the knuckle of the ball of the big toe, the ball of the second toe, and maybe a little bit of the third toe. But the fourth and fifth toes remain in contact with the ground. And what this does is it places the foot at a pre-stretched, so that really going to get some, deeper mobility into that foot. I'm still offset in my stance, so my right foot is a little bit more forward than the left. Spread knuckles, spread toes, grounded foot. And we're going to do the same thing with the knee, letting that knee turn out and then back in. But as we turn, we're maintaining contact with the ball of the foot. So as the knee turns out, that ball of the big toe stays grounded and connected. As we turn that knee in, ball of the pinky toe stays grounded and connected. And if you felt a stretch without the wedge, more than likely this is going to be a significant stretch. So I want to make sure that we're not pushing it, we're not forcing it. If you haven't done this before, a little bit goes a long way, and you might find that your foot's a little bit sore over the next couple of days just from doing this movement. And again, really try to maintain that grounding through the ball of the foot, especially the pinky toe. After we do good 5 to 10 reps back and forth, now we can get into lifting the heel up and pushing down into the floor. Although be soft on this. Since you're already in a pre-stretch, you may not be able to lift that heel quite as high. You might get a bigger stretch than you got before. I'm definitely getting more stretch through the lateral aspect of my right foot, which is where the plantar fasciitis discomfort has been. So this feels like I'm getting some good mobility into a part of the foot that has been tightening up, probably in relationship to what's going on the left side. And again, we can come back to lightly turning the heel out, or the knee out, lightly turning the knee in, so that we're focusing that pressure, ball of the big toe to ball of the pinky toe. Oh, I do feel a lot more on that ball of the pinky toe side when I add the wedge in. And then we're going to switch and move the wedge to the opposite foot, so that opposite foot's coming forward, sliding the wedge so it's underneath the ball of the big toe, ball of the second toe, and a little bit under that third toe. Again, it should be at a 45-degree angle from that front foot. And we're coming back to that knee. Spread toes, spread knuckles of the foot as we spiral that knee out, maintaining pressure through the ball of the big toe as we spiral that knee in, maintaining pressure through the ball of the pinky toe. Going nice and slow with your breath. My left foot, much tighter. I have less range, not terribly less, but it's definitely noticeable. Doesn't feel bad, it's not painful, it's just a little tighter. Especially as I rotate out is where I feel it the most. Once we get 5 to 10 reps, then we can get into driving that heel up to the ceiling and then bringing it back down. Again, this foot feels a little tighter and more restricted, although less so on that lateral arch, but I do feel it more up into the lower calf, especially on the really right outside of the ankle. Now we can start to kind of work knee turns out so that we're pressing through the ball of the pinky toe, knee turns in so that we're pressing more through the ball of the big toe. Ooh, a little popping. Definitely feeling some activation through that lateral aspect of my foot. Again, a little bit will go a long way. So we're now going to move the wedge off to the side, and we're going to come down to our back. So now that we got some pretty decent foot mobility, I want to come in and get some activation of the glutes. So legs are straight. We're going to bend one knee, placing that foot flat to the floor. And then we're moving that foot out to about 45 degrees from the midline of the body. I want to have a perfect tripod foot. So I want to have that same pressure, ball of the big toe, ball of the pinky toe, and heel. From here, I like to imagine that we're stomping on some grapes. So you got a bunch of grapes under your foot, and your goal is to squish all of the juice out of those grapes, all the way from the ball of the big toe, ball of the pinky toe, and heel. Everything's got to mash down perfectly. As we press down through that foot, we are scooping this pelvis up to the ceiling. Only this pelvis. Exhale as we scoop. Feel some stretch maybe through the front of the hip. Feel that glute start to tighten up in the back. Inhale, we're letting that hip down. Exhale, we're scooping up into it. I want to pay attention to any shakiness of the knee. Does it feel shaky and unstable? Does that knee want to turn in, or does it want to turn out? If it's turning in, it's going to lift that ball of the pinky toe off the floor. So I want to keep it straight over the heel. If it turns out too much, it's going to lift the ball of the big toe. So trying to keep that knee centered. Can we feel light stretch through the front of the hip? Can you feel that contraction in the glute? And if you can feel that contraction, then I want to scoop into it even more on each one. I really want to maximize that contraction with that good, solid, grape squashing foot. Doing a good 10 reps here. I want to really feel that glute start to get a little fatigued, a little tired, maybe a little burn in it from this action. After 10, we're going to switch feet. So again, foot comes flat to the floor. Go ahead and bring both legs straight so that your opposite leg stays, it comes back to midline. Foot comes flat to the floor, and then we're moving it out to 45 degrees from the midline of the body. Nice inhale. As we exhale, those toes are spread, grounding down. We're scooping that tailbone up to the ceiling. Feel that stretch through the front of the hip. Can you start to feel some contraction through the glute? Inhale, we're letting that hip back down. Notice if it feels different on this side. Is it a bigger stretch through the front of the hip? Is it harder to get the glute to activate? Left hip, for me, feels tighter. I'm not getting quite as high into it. And I've got to work a little bit hard to get that glute to activate the same amount as it did on the right side. So I'm going a little bit slower so that I can really work into that final aspect of, can I feel that glute fire up, which I'm now starting to get. Opposite leg should be completely soft and relaxed. This opposite hip should not be lifting up off the floor. If we're just kind of rolling over the top of it. So if you feel this opposite leg pushing down and trying to lift that hip up, that leg needs to get taken out of the game. Shake it out, lift it up, disengage it, shake it. Make sure it's not pushing down. Only action is through the one side, scooping into it, firing up that glute. I'm actually now getting in a much similar range on my left side as I got on my right side. We're going to go ahead and switch back to the other side. So again, let both legs go flat so that they're together. One foot comes flat to the floor, moving that foot out to about 45 degrees. We're going to do all of the same thing, except now my opposite hand is coming overhead. So as I scoop, driving that hip up to the ceiling, feel that glute contraction. Now, my free hand is going to reach across my body, across my chest. Head will have to lift up, reaching straight through the chest. Now turn around. So as I drive that hip up, I want to feel that glute contract first, locking into that squashed grapes, and then reaching straight through the chest. Again, head comes up. Eyes are reaching with my fingers, seeing how far can I reach. Inhale, I'm bringing it all the way back. Exhale, scoop. I want to make sure that knee is pressing straight down. We still have that perfect tripod, and I want to maintain those squashed grapes. As I reach, no matter how far I reach, I do not lose that back hip. I want to, if anything, the farther I reach, the more pressure I want to feel through my foot. And you can think about this as kind of we're wringing out the spine with this movement. Hips are reaching back as my hands are counter-reaching, and we're getting a nice washcloth wringing out effect. After 5 to 10 reps, go ahead and switch, doing the same thing on the other side. Nice flat foot, out to 45 degrees, pressing down, scooping up, locking in that back hip, and then reaching across through the chest. Now notice if one side feels different in your rotation. My left hip, again, it's the tighter hip. It's harder to get into that full activation of the glute. And then when I add rotation, oh, there's a spot right here where it gets a little tighter and more restricted. It even takes my breath away a little bit. So this is important pattern related to glute function is how does my spine move in relationship to my hips? If it's different on one side, that is a big deal. So I don't want to force it, but I do want to encourage a little bit more mobility here. Making sure we're scooping, we're grounding, and as I'm reaching, I'm not losing connection with that foot. If anything, I'm pressing even harder through it. Again, I want to have that nice ringing out effect of the hips and the spine. That started opening up there at the very end. So now we're going to very slowly come all the way up to our standing position, and we're going to reassess our balance standing clock. Now, we did a lot of mobility. The foot should be a lot more mobile and open, along with hips and spine. So an interesting thing here is you might find that your balance standing clock is actually shakier, feels less stable. That's fairly normal at first, especially if we are opening up mobility that you are not used to and you don't have a solid neurology to support. It's going to feel a little shaky. So go slow, take your time, make sure you're not moving into pain. And right now is where we're trying to establish that good neurology to support solid hips to foot relationship. So spread the toes nice and wide, ground that tripod foot. We're coming into that single leg stance, making sure that we are not wobbly through that we're not rolling back and forth through the foot. And then we're slowly exploring that, reaching out, point the toes as much as you can, coming all the way back to tall, and then opening up. Let that back hip rotate as you reach straight out to the side and point those toes. Ooh. Inhale, coming back up. Again, the most important thing is the foot, maintaining a perfect tripod. If that foot's wobbling back and forth, it means you're moving too big and you're not getting the movement, that you're not building your neurology. So I would rather you go small, even if it's not much movement, with a solid base, than to be wobbly at that foot. Okay? Now, if you're wobbly above the foot, that's fine. And we can even get into, as you build good stability with this balance work, we can get into what I call kind of inflatable arm tube guy, where you're reaching and you're a little bit more wild, but you're still challenging that foot to remain solid and base to the floor. Now, as long as this is not painful, we're going to slowly deepen into it, seeing how far can we reach in both directions. And come back to note, how far were you able to go at the beginning of the session? I feel like I'm getting deeper with more reach. I still have a little bit of that knee discomfort, but I'm able to get further into it without that elevating up into anything significant in pain. And then we'll switch, do the same thing on the other foot. Spread those toes, grounded foot, finding that single leg balance. This foot feels a little wobblier than it did earlier on, probably because it was stiffer and I got a lot more mobility out of it. As we start getting into our reaches, again, nice and slow in order to maintain that perfect tripod foot. Going slow, slowly working a little deeper with each one. Again, this knee feels a little shakier. Just, I'm definitely getting into some neurology that is a little challenging, but I am getting further and it does feel pretty solid. Now, if you found some significant imbalances through any of those movements and you're dealing with these kinds of foot, ankle pain issues, nothing got more, got elevated in pain, we didn't irritate anything, then I would suggest doing these movements every day for a good 3-4 weeks after the pain goes away. This is not going to solve all the problems. This is a starting point, but this is a starting point of doing it every day. 15 minutes or so is going to get you a long way to getting you out of that pain. And I will follow this up with the next level of building into that glute engagement into a stronger core in order to help kind of reduce these pain issues and not necessarily eliminate them, but do our best to eliminate them.